welcome, James. We saw you last year when you were very active with Bookworld. You have moved on from there, and I think you might be briefly mentioning that experience. But James now is the director of MORA, which is the National Online Retail Association, and the topic tonight, customer engagement and experience, is this the new loyalty? So it's a topic that affects all of us. Once you're online, you get inundated with both appropriate and inappropriate responses. I got an appropriate response of looking at health, comparative health sites, and that was what I wanted. But we've also experienced inappropriate responses. Now James is into the appropriate responses.
I hope so.
And positive. So welcome on a cold Melbourne night at the beginning of the school holiday period. We welcome you very much. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Ian. Well, good to be back, guys. Good to be back. Yes, as you mentioned, life has moved on. Nothing stays still for too long in this world, particularly around the technology space. So I will spend some time bringing you up to speed of where I've got to and where Bookworld's got to. At the moment, as you mentioned, I'm a director for NORA, which is a pro bono role I play there. It's a relatively new association. It was started in 2012 by a guy called Paul Greenberg, and really addresses the merging of online retail and bricks and mortar retail and the challenges the retailers face in getting that technology integration right. Australia has typically been behind the rest of the world. People think that's because we're technology laggards. I don't think that's right. We're actually just a small country with a small number of people in it, and if you go back 10 years, and I'll speak a bit to this, or 15 years and try to put an online retail site platform together, it would cost you about $10 million. And there's no way retailers over here could afford that. So we lag because we didn't have scale. Technology's come down in price, things have moved forward, and actually there's a lot of very exciting retailing going on in Australia today, and in the online space. So I'm going to look a bit more at customer engagement and experience, and really how I think loyalty in the old term is sort of just a word that people use, but really it's about how we capture customers, engage them, and the difficulties everybody has in that space. So, Bookworld, an unexpected journey. I can't remember whether I used that book pun last time or not, but it's one I've used at a number of conferences to explain the journey. It was a great gig whilst it lasted, and Bookworld did some tremendous stuff, but in August last year I sold Bookworld to Booktopia. Booktopia are now Australia's largest online pure play book retailer, and all the more stronger and better for having Bookworld. I'll talk a bit about the brands in a second, and they are looking to list their business and do an IPO potentially later this year. So we'll see, keep our eyes out for that. Really, it's a story of brands. Borders went bust in 2011. It was renowned for its stores, its massive stores. It was a great store concept, but when all the stores closed and we were left with just the online business, we had to think about how we reposition that brand in the marketplace. And I spoke last year a lot about our core value proposition with Bookworld and where we took it. But essentially we spent an awful lot of money launching a brand new brand into the marketplace, because we actually owned two brands at that time. We owned Bookworld and we owned Angus & Robertson. So we launched Bookworld because the original owners of the business after it went into administration were Penguin Books. And Penguin wanted whatever we did in this country to be transferable overseas. And our other brand, which was Angus and Robertson, which was very well known here, wasn't very well known overseas and wasn't a brand we could take overseas. So we decided we would change Borders to Bookworld because Borders had been damaged. But as I say, we spent 2 to 3 years launching Bookworld and achieved some great stuff. But whilst we were spending a lot of money on Bookworld, we thought Angus and Robertson would sort of wither and die on the vine. But it didn't. It just kept getting stronger and stronger, and we spent no money on Angus and Robertson whatsoever. And after about 2 years, I took a look at the business and said, you know what, if we're now going to be successful in Australia, there's a brand that we own that is, when we do nothing to it, is almost maintaining its sales. And if we put the money behind that brand that we're putting behind Bookworld, we'd probably go twice as quickly. And that ultimately was what we decided to do, and move to a single brand. Now, at the same time as we were thinking that and bringing these two brands together, and that's the new brand, which is Angus and Robertson Bookworld, that may resonate to some of you. I don't know whether any of you are Queenslanders in the audience. No. If you were, there was a Bookworld business up in Queensland which Angus and Robertson bought back in 1995, and then rebranded them all to Angus and Robertson Bookworld. And then the Bookworld brand was dropped, and when we took the business out of liquidation in 2011 and were looking for a new brand called Borders, we already owned that brand. So we've sort of gone full circle on that branding. But whilst we were doing that, there was other changes that were happening. Well, Penguin bought us back in 2011 out of administration, and Penguin was a publishing company, a global publishing company, and a very big one. And they wanted to start getting closer to their end consumer, so they bought a small retail and an online retail business in Australia, really as a trial, to see if they could build something here that they could then take overseas. But about a year after they bought us, Penguin themselves merged with Random House. And Random House are as big a publisher. It was the two biggest publishers in the world merging together. And Random House had a complete, really, dislike of mixing retail with publishing. Partly because they were owned by the Bertelsmann Group, which is a very big media corporation in Germany. And Bertelsmann own a lot of physical bookstore chains and retailers, and none of them have been successful. They owned a business called Doubleday. I don't know whether any of you remember Doubleday. It was the biggest global online subscription service for books. So you joined Doubleday and they would send you a book once a month. There was music and DVD, and it was massive. It was massive in Australia, massive in the UK, Europe, the US. And, you know, in the 90s, it was probably the best positioned brand to become online of any brands. And Bertelsmann failed miserably to do that. And Doubleday no longer exists. It actually went bust, but it could have been and should have been probably the Amazon of books. So that cost them a lot of money and didn't really endear them to retail. Their bookstore chains in Germany were going through the same problems that Borders and Angus and Robertson went through in Australia. So there was no real love or passion to take on the Bookworld Online initiative. And we weren't a profitable initiative, we were a growing initiative. And so when you become a corporate orphan, you can sometimes survive if you are profitable. But when you're unprofitable and not part of the strategic core, clearly you're in divestment mode. And I realised this probably about 12 months before we divested, and was very keen to either buy Booktopia and bring our two businesses together, and clearly that wasn't going to happen with this thing, so a sale to them was an obvious end result, and actually it was a great transaction that got the businesses in good hands. They're a very good business. Booktopia, family run, built out of their own cash flows, built in the shadow of the big brands like Borders, Angus and Robertson, Dimmocks, all of whom should have done better, should have done a better job, and they've become the best online retailers of books in Australia. Very good technology, very great little business, and now it's got those big brands with it. It's just a good business. That's not a recommendation to invest in them. I recommend you all do your due diligence. It is in the book industry still. But so ultimately, that's where Bookworld ended up. I left in August last year. I've been doing some consulting since that time with a company called Henslow, who are a corporate advisory business based down here. We do mergers, acquisitions, and interim work, and that's been great fun, and that's really where my focus is, other than with the National Online Retail Association. So, let's just go back a few years and go back to Borders stores. One of they were great stores, always pains me a bit to put that up, but one of the things that made those stores so successful in Australia was a thing called the Borders shortlist. And I don't know whether any of you guys were ever a member of the Borders shortlist, but it was an email, what we called a loyalty program. And I actually think that's a bad term for it, but I'll explain why later. But what happened was, back in the late 90s, way before Borders ever had a transactional website, they had an email program where you went into the store, you signed up for their emails, you sat at home, somebody sent you an email and it said 30% off books, and you printed that out at home, and you took your printout into the store and you got a discount. Yeah. Yeah. Now this drove over 30% of sales in store. So it was very, very successful. In 2011, when the stores went bust, Borders was voted, this was an independent review of loyalty programs, it was the third most popular loyalty program in the country, higher than Woolworths and higher than Jeans West and Myer. It was very, very successful, but I think it had a few issues. Now, what really happened was it didn't engage customers without them receiving an email, and it created an addiction that was going to be a problem for us. So what happened is you signed up for the email and you engaged a little bit by signing up, but when the email came through with a discount, you took that into store, made your redemption, and then you sat and waited. And you waited for the next email. And if it didn't come, you didn't come into stores. So ultimately you became addicted to the emails, and ultimately we sent them out at least once a month, so you knew one was coming, so why bother going into store without it? Yeah? Which didn't really matter, because there were enough other people going into stores, and it was only part of our sales, and you were engaged in that way, but you needed to be prompted every time. So the addiction was bad because all our customers just sat and waited for that, and if we didn't send an email, we didn't get them in. Secondly, it was addicting our customers to it wasn't bad enough. Addicting the management to it was even worse, because of course what happened is, as time went on, life didn't get so rosy and we needed to make our sales target at the end of the month. What would happen is somebody would say, we'll send out a shortlist email. So suddenly we'd send out 2 a month, right? And then we would make our monthly sales because we'd send out another email and everybody would come into stores. But what happens is the more you do this, the more you dilute it. And the more you dilute it, the less sales you make. And the less sales you make, the more you have to do it. So you actually start getting into that downward spiral. And ultimately, you're not engaging your consumer in a way that they will come in under their own needs and demands. Now, that's what happened in Australia. It was a very successful program. Sorry, yes?
Did the profit level drop right down on the specials?
Yes, look, we gave it a decent discount. So you basically would get that discount on that purchase. So the shortlist members were always buying at between 10 to sort of 30% off our standard prices.
So did that really cut the profit level?
It did cut the profit level, but it drove an awful lot of sales. So as long as they were marginal sales, so you had 70% of your business probably not on shortlist, right? And only 30% on shortlist. So that's fine. You can live with that. And if that's additional, so without shortlist, you only had 70% of sales at full margin, that marginal sales is absolutely brilliant. So it actually was a very profitable program, as long as it didn't suddenly become 80% of your sales. And it didn't, because the stores didn't have that. But what we had in Singapore, so I call this the vicious circle of loyalty, because it becomes addictive and ends up spiraling downwards. You end up having to send more emails. But what we had in Singapore, which was a business I ran, was something called the preferred card. And to own a Borders preferred card, you actually had to pay to become a member. So you went into a Borders store and you paid $10 to become a preferred card member. And for that, you got 10% off every purchase you made. So as a card holder, if we were offering 30% off books as an in-store promotion, you got 40%. If we were not offering anything off, you got 10%. But, sorry, you had to pay $20 to pick up this card. So there was a big barrier to enter, but once people entered that and parted with money, boy, were those guys engaged, yeah? Because they wanted to get a return on it. And they didn't need an email to prompt them to come back into store. If they needed to buy a book or a DVD or a piece of music or whatever, they'd come back to us because they were a card member. They were far more engaged. We had far fewer members of that program, but it drove almost as many sales as shortlisted. But you could argue that $20 is a lot, and it's difficult to get people to engage in that. However, at Christmas time in Borders, in Singapore, which was a very big store, it was the biggest Borders store in the world, did over $40 million a year in one store. When you consider an Angus and Robertson, a good Angus and Robertson will do about 1.2 million. So this thing was a big beastie. The average transaction value during November and December was over $200. So if you actually, that's when we used to sign everybody up. They paid $200, they paid $20, get 10% off. You actually get your money back in that transaction, and then for the rest of the year you're in the black. So it was a really good program. And if any of you guys have been to Kathmandu recently, they've got a similar sort of promotion that they used to be free, used to sign up to become a member and you get a discount, and now they make you pay to be a member.
So the paying, is that to give more profit to the company, or is it to make you special?
I think the paying, I think, gets you more engaged. If you think you've got a strong enough brand and you can afford, and you've got a good enough offer to make people invest and take money out of their wallet and join your program, then they will be very much more engaged than if you give it away free. Because they've invested. A lot of the time you don't have that opportunity. When we launched Bookworld, and I'll talk about it as I talked about it last year, we had a very successful loyalty program called the Citizen Program. When we launched that, we thought very long and hard about getting people to pay to join it, and we decided we couldn't. Bookworld was an unknown brand. We didn't think we had the real credence to make people pay. What we wanted from people, though, was their information. So to join the Citizen Program in Bookworld, you had to give us information about yourself, which to us was as good as money, because it meant we could then market to you more successfully. And I'll touch on that later in the presentation. But the great thing about the Borders Preferred Card and that investment and that engagement is it, as I say, it doesn't need us to prompt you to come into store. Every time you have a need, you come into store under your own energy and motivations. So I call that the virtuous circle of loyalty. And I think that's just an example of good loyalty versus bad loyalty, good engagement versus bad engagement. Because what it says is when you get the greater engagement you can get out of a consumer, the greater loyalty you ultimately get. So it's not so much about loyalty, it's about getting people involved and engaged and invested in your brand and your business. So I'm now going to draw back a bit from that and talk a bit of theory around technology, customer experience. And I just want to set the scene by playing this video.
I use my phone incessantly.
My phone is basically my boredom box. So anytime I get really bored, that's the first thing I go to. Oh, God.
If I had to guess, I would say maybe around 45 minutes a day.
Cumulatively, like if you condense it all together, hour and a half?
I think I'm on my phone like an hour. I have a feeling I might not like what I find out, but I know I probably am not going to change.
I am so scared that I am the problem. I am the person that I hate.
Oh my God. That's like longer than most movies I watch. Oh my God. No. No. Oh, I was completely wrong on like all counts.
Whew. Okay. The 138 pickups to me, that's a lot of checking my phone. That's a lot of just constantly going, huh? 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 I don't think so. I don't think so.
I think it's gonna change what apps I spend time with on my phone.
It makes me think that maybe I spend way too much time stuck down like this, and it wouldn't kill me to keep my head here more often during the day in my life.
So, I think we can all resonate a bit with that. Yeah, look, I mean, what it gives us is... leave it. What it gives us as retailers is a real issue in terms of getting people's attention now. You know, I mean, from my own experience in the book industry, you know, there used to be a time when people got on trains and read books, and aeroplanes and read books. They now don't. They've got access to this stuff, and people are just permanently in that. And therefore, trying to get people's attention and trying to get them engaged with anything else is hard work. And, you know, as businesses, our ability just to get people's time is really difficult. People don't have time now. And, you know, that's one of the things we have to do. And people will only give you time if they are engaged in the brand. And it's becoming harder and harder, and we're having to work harder to get people engaged in that. So that sort of sets, and that's what technology is doing, you know, it's taking away people's time. It's providing us all this info and everything else, but...
It's interesting, the watch takes you away from using your phone quite as much.
Right. But you're still using your watch?
Oh, yeah, but...
Oh, you're using watch less than your phone?
Rather than,
right.
Yeah, you get the little bits. And,
Yeah.
But it's a minor glance.
Yeah.
It's a little look and then you're away. It's not...
But the watch hasn't stopped people from having phones, and it hasn't taken over.
Oh no, because it's paired with the phone.
Yeah, correct. It's in danger of being both, isn't it?
As much.
Oh.
And you wonder where your phone is in the house.
Right.
And then you bring up the Find My Phone.
Right.
Pings, and you look around the house as to where it is.
That's quite useful. Yeah, look, I mean, you know, this thing's going to go beyond and more and more in the technology space. I mean, what it's doing, I think I show this slide because it's changing the way people are consuming stuff. People are just so much more informed today about anything. access to information. Secondly, they don't believe a word businesses say about their businesses and products. There is a lack of trust. What they believe is their peer group and what they have. So it's about reviews. That's where you know, so we'll spend all this money telling everybody how great our products are, but actually the best review we can get is getting a customer to talk about it. That's how you sell your products. And you know, people are doing all this stuff in real time, and they expect us to behave in real time as retailers. And ultimately what this is doing for retail businesses is it's throwing the sales, service and marketing departments all into what we call a customer experience department now, ramming the whole thing together and getting people to really look at that customer experience that they go through. So ultimately customers are arguably becoming the biggest disruptors of all. Yes, armed with technology, but they are the disruptors, because they have a desire to transact differently. You know, and if you take something like Airbnb, the largest hotelier in the world today, yeah. So we have more than 1.5 million listings, 34,000 plus cities. You know, these guys. Worth 25 billion, and this was done some time ago, 5 times more than Hyatt, and they employ 97% less people. They actually don't have any assets other than customers. It's their only asset, you know, and they're worth $25 billion. And this is happening a lot. So customers...
How do they protect themselves from being copied?
By growth. They're now too big. They are copied. And all the, I mean, it's a bit like when I say about Doubleday, you know. How did Amazon protect itself about being copied? People just weren't up the technology ladder in the same way, and their speed to market was pretty big. You know, Airbnb have only been around about 5 years, if not less. Yeah. And they're a global business. So once you get the brand known, right? So the other guys, who else does, what's the name of the other people that do Stays? Yeah, Stays.com? Yeah. So they were so focused on holding on to sort of weekend rentals and their own form of doing stuff that they never quite got there. It's a bit like the taxi industry. The taxi industry has tried so hard to say that Uber is wrong that ultimately they've lost out. The right thing they should have done is launched an Uber app almost immediately called Silvertop and just said, we're as good as Uber. You can do it through us. But they didn't. They spent all their time and energy telling everybody that Uber was wrong. Well, you know what? The customer didn't give a shit. What they liked was Uber because it was better. It was just better and easier. It's just so much easier. You know, you don't have to pay anybody as you get out of the car. And ultimately, if you've got the customer on your side, you're going to win that battle. So, you know, customers in the 80s, 1980, 100% of basically the market value of the S&P 500 on the US stock exchange was intangible assets. By 2010, over 50% of it is valued as intangible and really is customers. So the culprit, Moore's law. Yeah. So every 20 years, computers get 1,000 times more powerful.
It's monetizing information, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the speed with which people and the ability with which people can do stuff. You know, in 1999 it cost 15 million, I spoke to this, to set up an online business, you know, out of Silicon Valley. Now you can do it for 150 grand. And in fact, if you want to have a transactional website now, you can do it for 15 less. So you know, the cost of technology is coming right down. Uganda has more mobile phones than light bulbs. Indians have more access to a mobile than toilets. You know, this is the way technology is moving. And there are people in Britain who are creating an app that gets implanted on the vagus nerve, so every time you feel hungry, it goes off and you don't feel hungry anymore. So, technology is moving in places that, and it's going to continue. So it's changing the dimension of competition out there. And if you think, historically, we were very product-centric companies. We created a product to meet a customer demand, and then we marketed that product to as many people as possible. Now, we're having to be a lot more customer-centric, where we treat different customers differently, as opposed to every customer the same. And that requires relationship management. And ultimately, that's a one-to-one customer relationship, if you get it right. And with today's technology that's out there, there is a bigger and bigger argument that businesses should recognize you every time you're walking through the door, should know your profile, and should be able to treat you on an individual basis. And that's where businesses are trying to get to. So, I don't know whether you guys, you probably never stayed at the Rendezvous Hotel in Melbourne, right?
Which?
The Rendezvous used to be the Duxton, down by Flinders. The little hotel room, I know well too well. So I worked out that in the 14 years I've been commuting to Melbourne, I've spent over a year of my life at this hotel. So I used to have my own room there. They always gave me a 444 because it was quiet. It's not a great hotel. It's cheap, it's clean, and most importantly, it's quiet. And I used to use it over the 14 years that I commuted down here. But one of the reasons I used it is I used to have pretty good staff on the desk, and they always recognised me, and it's always nice to be greeted by your name. And a guy called Michael, who was always there, I used to pitch up about 9 o'clock at night. I'd work late and use my time down in Melbourne to work late. And he'd go, "Hello, good evening, Mr. Webber. A beer and a pizza?" And I go, "Yeah." And by the time I got out to my room, it was there. And it was great. So I didn't want to give that away for an extra $20 cheaper hotel, and it all worked. It all worked brilliantly until Michael left. Now all the other guys were good. Most of them recognised me, but none of them took that extra effort to find out that I always ordered a beer and a pizza. It wasn't that difficult. And what was even worse is it wasn't that difficult for the hotel to have noted that down and had that available for them. Now, if you went to a Hyatt or went something like that and you asked for a pillow change, for a feather from a down, and you went the next time, they would recognise you. You wouldn't need to ask for that. And the great thing about that is the technology is now here for us to capture those sorts of details relatively inexpensively if you want to make that difference. And really treat people personally, and it's about making somebody at the customer-facing end informed about the customer they're facing without them knowing it, and surprising them with your level of information. And that's what you get if you turn up in the Hyatt, you haven't been there before, and suddenly they've got a feather pillow saying, "Welcome, Mr. Webber." And you then actually save them time and energy, because you don't have to ring them up, get some poor guy to come up, change the pillows over, So one-to-one marketing is not single random acts of kindness. One-to-one marketing is process and information. And if you can record customer preferences, small things make a huge difference to that customer experience. And customer experience is probably the greatest untapped source, not only of increased revenue, but of cost savings, if you can get that right. It saves everybody time and energy. Just get up. So if we go back to our graph and we look at, if I was a product-centric business, then basically I'm trying to manage the public's perception of my products. That's traditional marketing. I market that my widget is fantastic. It meets all your needs, and I go on to TV and whatever. But as I say before, people are beginning to distrust that sort of stuff. If I'm now a customer-centric business, I have to manage each customer's experience differently. I have to take it as read. They probably know whether that product's good or bad or not. If they haven't, then they wouldn't be here. So it's more about the way I sell it, not what I'm selling. So what makes a great or a good customer experience? Really, it can be summed up in one word. something that's frictionless, right? Something that's easy. Right? And you of all guys, of all the groups of the Macintosh and Apples, there is a brand that basically has put that at the focal point of everything it does.
We say the fewer mouse clicks, the better the
Yeah,
experience.
absolutely. And it's the same with any retail experience anyway. So like water and electricity, customers will seek the path of least resistance. Which takes me on to a story about a management consultant in the US. So he's in New York, he's got a bit of extra time, and decides to go into a sports shop to buy some sneakers. And it's Saturday, and it's busy, and there's only one sales assistant, and there's a queue. So he sits in the queue, and he's got nothing better to do, so he waits, and he watches the sales assistant, and he's got all the Nikes and the Adidases and all the main brands, and then there's a couple of brands he hasn't seen before. And this sales assistant is purposely selling people away from the Nike and the Adidas onto this other brand. So he showed it hand about 2 or 3 times, and he gets into his turn, and he says, look, I can't help but ask, why are you trying to sell me or everybody these brands? Have you got too much stock of that? Or, are you on a better bonus for those? And he goes, no, it's simple. That's the only brand of shoe that comes in boxes already laced up. I don't have time to lace up all the other ones. Yeah? So that brand, without knowing it, had taken the friction out of his sale. It actually moved the customer queue on quicker, and everybody was benefiting of Adidas and Nike. Yeah? So those things, those little things, can make a massive difference. So
You wonder why so many stores and things like that have actually such bad customer service. Where you have to wait a long time.
it's not easy getting it right. Having run stores and dealt with people, it's not easy, and it's not easy doing it right every time, all the time. But the good guys who do it, Virgin is one, they embed it into their culture.
This is Virgin Stores or Virgin Airlines?
I think Virgin almost across the board.
Yes.
Almost across the board. I'll talk to them a bit later. They're one of mine.
You mentioned their timing.
Yeah.
And certainly that's one thing I experienced, that in a couple of stores that I shop at, they know all about me. They know where I leave my phone.
Yeah.
They know everything I've bought in the last few years.
Yeah.
But they don't find that out until I'm standing at the counter
That's right.
with what I'm about to buy this time. They
Yeah.
don't know when I walk in.
Yeah.
They're just finding out that I'm leaving after having been in again.
There are loads of stores and retailers that have spent hours trying to think about, when the iPad launched, for instance, how do you bring technology into the store environment to help the customer? Yeah, and the initial thinking was all around, let's put a computer in the store so when they're in store they can find stuff that we don't have in store. Yeah, and it's all been around putting that technology at the customer's end. The best and quickest way they could do that is switch that right round and make the technology available to the store attendant and make him better informed. So as soon as you walk in through the store, ultimately, if you have a loyalty card in your wallet or some form of RFID detector, or your mobile phone, then there should be a beacon going off, that information can come out, and immediately there they go on the iPod and go, hello, great to see you again, do you want a blue or a red one? And that's where it should be. That's where I think they have the biggest opportunity to use technology. Not in putting it customer facing, but putting it in staff facing. They'll get there, but it's a process. So if customer experience is so important, why then, when you look at the correlation between satisfaction and loyalty, is the correlation so poor? It's 0.13 on the R-squared on that. Now, to put that into context, the R-squared on a good education and doing well at work is about 0.7. So that is a very low correlation, and you would expect it to be high. But interestingly, 0.7 is about what you get when you correlate disloyalty, and a poor experience. So that's when it becomes important. So the secret to customer loyalty is a frictionless customer experience. So there's a group called Forrester, which I don't know whether you know, they do a lot of research into behaviours and things, and they have an experience pyramid, which starts with you basically producing a product that's got to meet a need. Right? You then have to make that transaction easy. And then, if you can make that transaction enjoyable and engage the consumer, you can really create an excellent experience. But there's a big difference between product experience and service experience. So if I go out and buy a great pair of sneakers or a great product, I would tell people. But not as much as if I buy a bad product, I actually don't tell people. Because if that guy had sold me those sneakers because they had laces in and they gave me blisters for the next week, I probably don't want looking like an idiot to my mates and say I bought this really cheap pair of sneakers and actually they haven't worked. So people actually don't talk about bad products anywhere near as well as they talk about good products. So you buy a good product, you talk about it. Buy a bad product, you put it behind you, move on, don't tell anybody. So having a good product experience is clearly important. Having a bad product experience, not quite so damaging as having a bad customer experience. People don't talk about good customer experiences. Why do people not talk about good customer experiences? Because they expect it. People expect now good customer experience.
Except politicians.
Possibly. So when you get a good customer experience, which is not easy to deliver, you expect it, so it's not out of the ordinary. A great one maybe you talk about, but when you get a bad customer experience, boy do you talk about it. Yeah? So you need to produce a good product, yes, but what you want to avoid is a bad customer experience.
Well, it becomes a personal issue in a bad experience. You haven't been recognised as the customer and so on.
All of that. I think people their expectations are today, with what we know and the competition that is out there, that if they don't value you, it doesn't matter how good your product is. There's always somebody else. If the BMW dealer makes you feel unwanted, you go and buy a Mercedes. There's always an alternative. So delight the customer with your product, yes, but eliminate the friction in your customer experience and get down to that level of detail, understand the customer's journey. So most businesses are spending loads and loads of time up here in loyalty programs and marketing to you in exciting ways. And that's where you should be, but you can only be there if you've addressed this bit down here. And that's where so many businesses, I think, fail. They have a great product, they do all that fun stuff at the top, but actually they've got a clunky process, and it just annoys you. So you have to start on making that transaction easy and eliminate the friction. Because, as we said, customers follow the path of least resistance. Now, when you look at a good customer experience, there are 4 to 5 things that really make that up. One is you have to be reliable. You have to be valuable. And I call these 2 tickets to the game. If your products and services are not either reliable or valuable, you probably won't remain in business. If you can also be relevant and trustable, that is where you can differentiate yourself from the other guys. And finally, if you can be fun and engaging, you have the opportunity to create really lasting engagement with your consumers and hold on to them. Because today we live in an experience economy. We've moved from being an agrarian one, producing stuff, or an industrial one and making it. We've just passed through the service one, and we're now in an experience one where we have to stage events in our stores. Now, I've talked all of that because I'll then go back to my time at Bookworld and how we, some of this is recapping a bit about last year, but it's taking it from a slightly different angle. So when we launched Bookworld and we were trying to work out what it stood for, speed of delivery was the one place we felt we could make a difference, because Amazon and Book Depository couldn't get you books as quickly. We had the biggest book warehouse. So we made that an absolute core of our offer. We made price, tried to take that out with the Amazon price guarantee. We improved our customer service from 2-day turnaround to a 3-hour turnaround. And we really leveraged the Australian piece. But the other bit we wanted to always build was this engagement bit. We wanted Bookworld to be an engaging brand, which is not easy online. And that was never going to be an immediate thing. We couldn't just say Bookworld is engaging. That would be something that would develop over time. And that was why we launched the Citizen program, which we launched off the back of the Borders Preferred Card concept, except you didn't pay to join, because we didn't think the brand was strong enough to warrant that payment. And that's what really built the success around Bookworld, because when people joined, they could just go and buy, but if they became a citizen, they got an extra 10% discount, and all they had to do was fill in a piece of information about themselves. But that little bit of information filling made them engage their time and energy. And then for that, they got this extra 10%, which they held on to. So ultimately, we got that virtuous circle of loyalty out of this program. Not as engaged as if we'd asked them to pay $20, but I'm not sure if we had, we'd have got the sign up that we needed. Now, if it had been Angus and Robertson, maybe we would have done. Why was the engagement so important? Ultimately, we were selling a commodity. There was very, if you want to buy a John Grisham, you can buy it off us, you can buy it off anybody else. We wanted people to ultimately, we had to be operationally good. We had to deliver on time. We could differentiate by being quicker for a period of time, but ultimately our competitors would catch up. And indeed, Booktopia built over that period a bigger book warehouse than we did. Yeah, and I'm not sure they've quite got their delivery as slick as we had ours, but they will do. And so that ability to differentiate on speed was going to disappear. So what we needed is, when that happened and we were all on a level playing field, we wanted people to trade with us because we were more fun. And we knew that if we invested in engagement, we'd get a sales benefit from that, because the stats and everything tells you that you do. So when we launched Bookworld, the Citizen program, we were really surprised to see that we just continued to build people into that Citizen program. We thought we were going to get a massive engagement to start with, and that would then fall away, because the initial engagement we expected was all those old Borders customers would come on in the first 3 months, and then after that it'd be harder work to find new people. But actually, what we found was almost completely the opposite. Only 20% of the citizens came out of Borders. And that basically tells you that once you've pissed off a customer, it's very difficult to get them back. And every Borders customer bought gift cards at Christmas, and then in February we closed all the stores, and none of those gift cards were possible to redeem. So it left a very bad taste in a lot of people's minds. Now the same was true of Angus and Robertson, but somehow Angus and Robertson got a completely different reaction than Borders. People came back, and Angus and Robertson had a 123-year-old history in Australia, and people actually blamed Borders for bringing Angus and Robertson down. Borders was seen as the tall poppy, the big outsider, the American business, came in, took over, destroyed Angus and Robertson. And we had people sort of emailing us saying, I've just spent $50 on Angus and Robertson, I hope it helps. We never got that from Borders customers. We just got, redeem my gift card, you bastard. It was a very, very different thing. So we found it easier to get new customers onto this program than existing ones. And what was more pleasing is the customers bought 20% more per order, and they bought 70% more frequently, which made them more than 100% more valuable than our other customers. And these guys were 80% of our sales, but we were only giving them 10% off.
Did you research the name Citizen Membership?
No. We just went for it. We were a very small business. We were only about 6 people when we started. So I wasn't going to do too much. Bookworld came out because we owned it, it was easy. And then we thought we're Bookworld, so we came up with the Citizen of Bookworld. So we had a whole load of planning of where that was going. There were going to be different levels of citizenship. So, if you want a loyalty program, at some point you might want a tiered loyalty program, where different levels get different access to different benefits. So there was going to be sort of, counsellors and premiers and whatever it was at Bookworld. But we never quite got that far. And it accounted for 80% of sales. And they were more engaged. They opted into marketing, which was the key thing. So that whole engagement, so that was part of it. And then when we did all of our marketing, and I showed this last year, it's easy to go out and put out billboards and put posters out and market yourself, but try and do stuff differently. If you try and do stuff differently, you get a different reaction. And so, the first thing we did was say, well, let's take the sign out and put a few of them out whereby, these were bookshelves with perspex in front of them, and we then went out on Facebook and we said, go and find these, and people engaged in going and find it, and if you find it, take a photograph of yourself and then send that back into us. And it's just a small thing, and not a huge number of people did, but it just got people talking about it, to the extent where we said, I wonder what would happen if we took out the perspex. And I love this. I can probably only live on this video for a few more months because it's over 2 years now, but we'll show it anyway. But this is what happened when we did that.
Too many choices. I don't even know which ones to choose. Yeah, the pressure.
When are we going to get that bus?
Looking at the books and I missed the bus.
It's amazing.
I've read it 3 times.
Really?
I love it.
Oh, lovely.
You're
Welcome to Bookworld. But I like that story.
I got Usain Bolt.
I've chosen Tim Winton, because I think he's a great author.
Exciting what you're doing today.
That would not have happened if we had not, within the business, said, how can we do stuff differently? How can we be different? How can we had no budget. It cost about, the whole thing cost about 10 grand. Most of that was filmed on my son's GoPro. It was a thing that everything we did, we tried to say, let's do something different. And then once we got that, it was about how do you engage people beyond that. So people engaged with that. It went viral. We got loads and loads of people telling us, why don't we come and do it around their neighbourhood? So once you've done that, you've got to re-engage them. So the only thing left to do, sorry, I've done that again, is, why should we do it around you? Well, you tell us why we should do it around you. So we went out with another YouTube.
Recently, we built some pop-up bookshelves at a couple of bus stops to see what would happen. The reaction was overwhelming, and we were inundated with requests to bring the Bookworld pop-up shelves to you. Which got us thinking, where should we build our next pop-up? Do you know a place that deserves a truckload of free books? Whether it's a small town, school, community group, anywhere. Visit bookworld.com.au/pop-ups to place your vote.
So it was easy for us to say, right, well, let's choose a place, let's go somewhere, let's do it, it will make sense. With me it would have been do it somewhere where we've got a large audience, go to Sydney or Melbourne. But we said, no, look, we've engaged people, let's keep this conversation going in some form. And that's what we did. Now, we had over 6,000 responses to that within 24 hours. So we then cut it off quickly and said, right, how do we now choose out of the 6,000? And I said, well, clearly, if we're going to keep the conversation, we shouldn't be choosing, they should. So what we did is we narrowed it down to four good causes, which had to sort of hit as many sort of demographic things as possible. But I decided that really we wanted one in a major capital, which should probably win it because that's where the most votes were. We wanted one in the rural, and we wanted one in a sort of Tassie or something like that. Springwood, which had just been burnt to a cinder. We chose a youth project in Tassie, in Melbourne. There was a town called Dirranbandy in the middle of nowhere, which hadn't had rain for 4 years. And then we had a school in Tasmania. So you can try and put these things out there on the hope that you actually are manipulating the result a little bit, but the key thing was to engage them and let our audience choose this.
Remember this? Where should we build our next pop-up? Do you know a place that deserves a truckload of free books? Well, the votes came in and there were over 6,000 nominations from all over the country, but there could only be one winner. And you chose Dirranbandy. Where? Well, it's right here. Yes, literally the back of Burke. Dirranbandy is a small town that's been doing it tough. It's recently had a long drought, and now to top it off, some big floods. So we gathered up the Bookworld team from Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane and headed into the outback. The journey was long, hot and treacherous, but we had books to deliver. None of us knew what to expect in this small town in the middle of nowhere, and so after we arrived and set up Dirranbandy's first ever pop-up bookshelf, we were blown away with what happened next.
Dirran is about a 6-hour drive from the nearest bookstore. No one really wants to drive a total of 12 hours just to buy a book. A lot of small businesses, a lot of the properties, which means that a lot of the people in town have been doing it tough with the drought. People were here well in advance of the start time. The response has been enormously gratifying. Kids, they're giggling, they're laughing, they're playing. It's a great little social get-together for the town as well.
My favourite author would have to be Roald Dahl. He's really funny. I got Dork Diaries.
Well, it's truly an amazing sight that Bookworld are distributing all these books to the community of Dirranbandy.
A wonderful day.
So with weary bodies and beaming smiles, we left this little town with thousands of new stories that we hope will provide maybe just a little bit of relief to the people who have been doing it tough for so long. Then it was back on the road and back to Bookworld, until our shelves pop up somewhere else. I wonder where that could be.
So I think last year I only showed you the first video because I don't think we'd done the other two in at that time. And what we've done ultimately now is created a theme that we could just take forward and engage. And it was going to be really important to differentiate Bookworld as a brand from everything else. That whole tone of voice, that fun, that slightly irreverent nonsense that we did. You know, we had Booktopia as a competitor with a very similar brand name. So it was important that we weren't, in my view, as stuffy as they are. They're quite a typical boring book retailer, and we were going to be slightly different. And that was really what was behind all of that. And it just goes, if you engage the audience and you really get that, you get benefits from it.
Where should we build our next file?
Oops, try not to do that.
This is your Facebook page.
Well, Facebook, YouTube is where we released it. We had it on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I mean, basically, we grew over 18 months, 2 years, over 100,000 followers, which, to put that in perspective, when we started the business, we had none. Dimmock's had 25,000 followers, and they've been around forever and a day. Booktopia had been around for 10 years and had 30,000. And we got to 100,000 in 2 years. And we also had what they call a highest clout score, which is a sign of engagement. We had a higher clout score than Amazon Books by the time we finished. So it wasn't just that we had loads of followers and likes, but we had loads of people engaged in the brand, and they were engaged. They enjoyed what they were getting. And we won lots of awards for that. So, in summary, really, the inputs to loyalty, I think, are you've got to start with a good product, clearly, but then you've got to create this great experience around it. And that experience has got to engage the consumer. And if you can top that off by having a bit of fun with them, then I think you create that lasting brand advocacy and that engagement. And that is your loyalty program. That is it. If you get those things right, you don't need anything else. So when I sort of look to other brands that have sort of inspired me in this, and you look at Frictionless, you know, these guys, as we all know, do it extremely well. But you know, even somebody like McDonald's, that's what they've based their whole business: fast food, processing, making it easy. You turn up, it's the same product, consistency, speed. And when you look at making it fun, you know, Virgin sits in some amazingly serious businesses. You know, it runs trains, aeroplanes. These things are no joking matter, and yet it manages to put a fun air to that and bring a culture of fun to it. And I just think they're a tremendous brand. I love what they do, and certainly was behind a lot of my thinking in Bookworld. And then there's a company called Vinamofo, you may or may not know, but if you buy online wine, these guys took all the online retail marketing awards the year after us. They just have a really, really good way of marketing. They've got some great wine offers out there, and I mean, we've all heard of Clear Skins, right? They're great value, they're good, you never quite know what's in there. These guys wrap it up and it becomes black market offers, and they just do stuff in a fun way. They're not snooty, they don't talk too much about, you know, the great flavours. It's a bit in there, but they're just great marketers, and they make what is a very over subscribed category. They're the only ones that really do it with fun.
The other, if I could mention, the other one who developed a reputation for fun were the guys who developed Woot, W-O-O-T. And Woot was an American site where they got remainders and redundancies and...
Wine site?
No, just any general sort of...
Right, yeah.
And they had one product for the day.
Yeah.
And what attracted them was not so much the product, it was their brilliant description. It was so irreverent.
Brilliant.
Just to read about it. Then they sold it to Amazon.
Right.
And Amazon killed the principle of one thing, killed it. And so these guys have bounced back after their non-competition agreement and have come up with a new site with the same old principle, one product, funny write-up, and they've called it MEH, M-E-H, as in MEH. And they're doing brilliantly well.
Yeah.
Again,
I think
fun side of things.
People want something that's just different.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you know, Cash of the Day, all those guys, they all do this stuff, and that stuff has fallen away now. And ultimately, online retail, pure play online retail, is, I think, will struggle. People are attached themselves to a brand. They want that brand both online and offline. And I don't think it means that every pure play has to have fixed bricks and mortar stores, but I think they'll have pop-up stores, and they'll have a physical presence in places. And there'll be some that are established enough now to survive, but you know, I think the real winners are the old brands that had bricks and mortar stores that now do online well and mix those two well. They're the real stayers, and the ones, you know, John Lewis is probably one of the best examples of that. You know, department stores are dead, yeah, apart from John Lewis, which has, you know, they're doing over 30% of their total sales is online. There aren't many retailers that are doing that. They have great customer service, and they're a great model. So that's it, guys. I just thought I would talk to, you know, the experience side, the importance, and how that's sort of taking over from the old loyalty perspective.
Can we talk a little bit? My reading of it is that airlines are trying this out and they don't know how to do it. They're stuck with their legacy systems, with their loyalty frequent fly programs. They try and match it up with credit cards and so forth. And that's dying a death, I think. And the talk now I'm hearing is as much as possible to personalise it, but way beyond your gold tier flyers where you put your preferences in and they know exactly who you are and what seat you are. The allegedly high value flyers, and yet there may be only 4 of them on a plane of 100 people. There's 96 people that they're just ignoring completely because they're not that frequent a flyer. And my hearing is that they start to try and personalise it as much as possible at the time you make your booking.
I think that there's a whole raft of things that they can try and do. I mean, one of the things is, and they've started doing it, is texting you before you get on the gate, you know. They know that you haven't checked in yet, it's 10 minutes away. They know those that have checked in, they can text everybody who hasn't checked in. And you may still be having a conversation with someone and think, oh, right, you know, great. So, and that's in some way personalising stuff. But the airline that I saw do the biggest transformation of any airline, and I think it was one of the best cultural turnarounds of an airline in the last 10 years, was Air New Zealand. Air New Zealand was the most shoddy, old, sort of crusty, planes were, the staff were, everything was. And then they actually transformed almost overnight, bought new planes, and they did a tremendous transformation, and their customer service was brilliant. And whoever brought them through that did a great job.
They were the first to change the onboard safety announcement and fun it up a little.
That's right. Well, they weren't. Virgin had done it. Virgin were the first, but Virgin had no legacy systems, none of that. They were the only ones I know who have made that transformation successfully. And it was very, very successful. Personalisation is becoming a massive theme if you look at the latest set of new online rights. So I do a bit of judging for the Online Retail Awards. And if you have a look at the ones that are being talked about at the moment, there are people who personalise product. So, you know, Shoes of Prey, I don't know whether you've heard of Shoes of Prey, but they're an online business where you can design your own shoe, get them made for you. They're an online business. They've now got concessions and DJs. They're now also in Harrods, I think. But, you know, Mon Purse, which is ladies' purse, you can get personalised. Yeah, they're Australian.
Try them out.
Yeah, Mon Purse, Shoes of Prey. You know, and so those, clearly they're not cost-based, but they're about, you know, allowing you to personalise stuff. There's a very good business down here called Tiny Me, which is about personalised kids stuff, jigsaw puzzles and all that stuff.
Something that people have been talking about for a while, this ability of the technology to help vendors, marketers, target
Yeah.
the individual, not just the demographic,
Yeah.
the individual. So I know, and you do this probably as well, when you land in an unfamiliar city, Foursquare pops up and says,
Yeah.
I know you like Thai food, there's one just around the corner.
Well, James, on behalf of the group tonight, thank you for the next stage of your journey.